in Ukraine Media Center. And we have planned 3 briefings for today. The first one about evaluation of the current situation and possible scenarios, possible developments. Our speaker here will be Oleksiy Arestovych, advisor to the Office of the President of Ukraine. The second briefing at 2 p.m. will be evacuation from towns and villages in Kyiv province, situation in Chernobyl nuclear power plant, and criminal situation in the province. The speaker there will be Andrei Nebetov, head of the main police directorate for Kyiv province. And our third briefing will be by our armed forces of Ukraine about the current situation on the front lines. I'd like to remind you that Ukraine Media Center is mostly about helping foreign journalists. So if you have any additional requests, you're welcome to approach us. Join our Telegram channels where we provide up-to-date information. Also, I'd like to remind you that we also have our media center in Lviv. There we have a separate schedule, and there are speakers who speak there at that part of the media center. You're welcome to monitor those and to also use and broadcast the briefings in Lviv. And now we are working on the technical possibility to ask questions for speakers there in Lviv. We'll try and interact with that part of the media center in that way. And now we are to start our first briefing, which is, well, about security. Unfortunately, for security reasons, we cannot guarantee, we can't ensure that Mr. Arestovych would be able to come here. The security guards recommended that he should speak online. Now Mr. Arestovych will provide a general review of the situation, military and political situation. And then we'll be able to ask him questions. We also have some questions which journalists asked online on the internet, and I will pass those questions to Mr. Arestovych after we have this briefing with the audience here. Andrei? Sorry, Oleksiy? Oleksiy, are you here? Can you hear me? Please unmute, and if possible, switch your video on. Just a moment. We are now connecting to Mr. Arestovych.
Власне, ви можете починати. Давайте ви дасте загальний
Basically, you can start, and please provide some general description of the situation. So we have simultaneous interpretation here, so you can speak at your own pace. I should not stop, right? No, sorry, we don't have your sound here.
Так, чутно, чутно.
Dear colleagues, I'd like to welcome you. Thank you for your attention. If I may, I'll tell you about the general situation, the military and political situation here, and then I suggest that we spend most time on questions and answers. Вітя, у мене звуку нормального немає. Just a moment, Oleksiy. Please wait a second. We have some problem with sound for interpretation.
Выключаем. Так, кто? Дима, выключите. Кто выключил?
1, 2, 3, раз. вам Арестовича нужно слышать? Объясните задачу.
Ну так, конечно, мне ж его надо слышать, чтобы переводить.
Хвилинку.
Just a moment. So.
Попробуйте, пожалуйста.
Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Дикий треск, ну как-то слышно. Вітя, іде або 50 Гц, або хрін, я знаю, ну якісь весінні таке. No, you should not wait. Вітя, послушай секунду, это 50 Гц. So, again, next attempt. Welcome, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for your attention. If I may, I suggest that we arrange our communication, our discussion in the following way. I'll briefly describe the military and political situation around Ukraine, the current situation, and then I suggest that we spend time on your questions. That will be more convenient. So, briefly, during the day, no significant changes in the situation, placement, or actions of enemy nor our Ukrainian troops. In main areas of operation, the main areas of operations remain as they were. The enemy tries to move forward. They also try to surround our group, our troops.
І більшу частину він перейшов, противник перейшов до утримання району оборони, який він зв'язав.
Sorry, the interpreter has no sound at the moment.
На утримання або покращити свої позиції.
Олексій,
відкривають
вибачте,
Да.
сьогодні якийсь чудовий день з технічними. Хвилинку ще, будь ласка.
Ретроградний, да.
Ретроградний Меркурій, так. Вибачте. Олексій, скажіть ще що-небудь.
Oleksiy, could you please tell us something? Glory to Ukraine, glory to heroes. No, let's try and repeat starting from Chernihiv. As far as I understand, there where we started having technical problems. Yeah, you're welcome. So we are to continue. The main hottest areas of operations, I already mentioned those. About Kyiv, Sumy, Chernihiv, and Kharkiv, there the enemy mostly started defending because they cannot run any offensive anymore, and their tactical actions to improve their positions and artillery battles. During the night, the armed forces of Ukraine would strike enemy's groups, and there have been several very good hits, in particular the commandment of the point of the 35th Army of Russian Federation, with a lot of generals were hit. Our air forces were downing enemy's aircraft, 4 airplanes, at least 2 helicopters and 1 UAV, 1 drone, and several cruise missiles. The enemy continues to respond by striking our cities, mostly military facilities, but also air-to-force cruise missiles with their strategic bombers, which do not enter Ukraine's airspace and Iskander missiles from the Republic of Belarus. But I have to say that they're so professional in quotation marks that just one of their 4 rockets and missiles hits the intended target and the rest hits residential blocks. And sometimes there is also intended bombing of residential bombs. In particular, yesterday, there was a strike against the drama theater in Mariupol, even though there was a clear marking, children here. And there were about 1,500 people with children, innocent local civilians, and it's even difficult to count losses now because large part of the building has been destroyed, and it's difficult to count how many people are there. So that's the current situation, and now you're welcome to ask your questions. Please speak into the microphone and introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Tim Judah, I'm here for The Economist of London and the Financial Times. It was very interesting that you said only 1 in 4 of missiles hits their intended target. I would like to ask if you have any idea of what proportion of the explosions around residential areas that we've seen here in Kyiv are actual targets, and what proportion are intercepts where the missile or debris has fallen on buildings. Thank you very much.
Олексій, потрібна допомога з перекладом?
Ні, я все цілком розумію. Біглості немає, а розуміти. Дивіться, значить.
Look, one of the missiles, these are general numbers, of course, it depends on the particular area of attacks. Like in Yavoriv training area, where out of 30 missiles, 22 were down by our air defense forces. But on average, one of the 4th missiles is down by our air defense. 1 missile hit the target, and 2 others hit the civilian sites. That's general proportion. Please speak into the microphone. Are they targeting civilians purposely, those 2 missiles, those 2 rockets, or they just hit them by chance? Well, there are 3 types of cases. The first one is about Kharkiv, Mariupol, Akhtirka, Chernihiv, and Suma. In those cities and towns, the enemy purposely hit civilian sites. And the brightest example is Mariupol, where more than 90% of residential buildings have been hit. We understand that 90% cannot be just by chance. We understand that all too well. We had a press briefing with captured Russian pilots, which said that they just use those free-falling bombs. And, you know, they hit Kharkiv city council and others, so you saw it on air. Now about Kyiv, I cannot say that they hit civilian sites on purpose. They tried to hit military facilities, but they missed a lot of times, and many times they would miss and hit civilian buildings. There were also several cases of artillery shelling against Padil and Abalon and the gate. I think that this is the individual excess, because there may be 2 cases. Either some Russian military tried to do some revenge in a non-systematic way, it's about several cartridges or bombs, or they just aim their artillery in the wrong way, because there are combat missions in the northwestern and northeastern part of Kyiv, and maybe they just aim in the wrong way there. About central and Western Ukraine, it was mostly about airfields, but there were also civilian airports. So again, they purposely hit civilian airports in Lutsk, in Vinnytsia, and other cities.
Hello, Colin Freeman from the Daily Telegraph.
Yeah, Colin Freedom is Daily Telegraph.
Could you tell us anything more about
Чи можете ви
the
нам
incident in Chernihiv
розповісти
yesterday, where it was said that 10
про
people
ситуацію
were
вчора?
shot dead as they queued for bread? There seems to be some other reporting which suggests that the people were killed by shell fire. I wondered if you had any more detailed information.
Він питає про Чернігів, да? Вірно це?
Так, про Чернігів, про випадок.
There was a question about the case in Chernihiv where people were killed. There was a shooting when they were just waiting in line. Yeah, they were waiting in line. There was shelling. And Chernihiv is one of those cities and towns which are shelled every now and then, including civilian side. The water supply networks have been damaged there, and the electricity supply and everything. But there are also some stronger cases. For example, we know for sure about the case where 4 days ago a family on 3 cars with their friends were moving towards Balaklia and Izum, and the Russian military stopped them, checked their car, saw that there is a family, including small children under school age, and then they said good luck, and they shoot at them. One of those cars survived, the other one, its fate is unknown, and the third one was shot at. I can give you the phone number of a lady who was with her children in the first car, and she can tell you what happened. There are many cases like that, which when in towns around Kyiv there is mass-scale raping and killing, shooting of local civilians, and it increased gradually. Initially, such cases did not happen, and on the 3rd or 4th day, some first cases started, and now that's about systematic violence. And now I keep getting new data every day with photos, with audio records, and so on and so forth. So the Russian army started and has been carrying out brutal killing of local civilians. And so there was that yesterday's judgment of the International Court of Justice in The Hague, which confirmed these facts of genocide of Russian Federation against Ukraine. So the International Court of Justice agreed that this is genocide against innocent people. It cannot be classified in any other way. I'm not a lawyer, but I see that there are more than 100 of such cases, not dozens, but hundreds of such cases with mass-scale killing and theft and a lot of raping and so on and so forth. And we see something, what we see in Chernihiv is maybe one of 300 cases.
Доброго дня.
Good afternoon. I'm Konstantin Goncharov from Ukraine. Dear Oleksiy, what about negotiations? My question is about negotiations. Yesterday, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, said that the Russian position in the negotiations with Ukraine has become more realistic. Could you please tell us in more detail what's realistic about their position and how much difficult those negotiations are? Thank you. Look, the negotiation process can be commented by 2 people only: the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky himself, and Mikhailo Podolyak. In the same way as I'm an advisor, Mikhailo Podolyak is also an advisor to the office of the president of Ukraine, but he has been a designated person to comment on that. I can only comment on those comments or comment on the Russian side's comments, but I'd like to say from the very beginning that it's not my comment about negotiations. I can only comment about those comments. And if you're interested in my comments on comments, I can say then that based on what I know, Russia wants to achieve some peace agreement. They completely understand the results of their loss in the battlefield and the results of those international sanctions. They're very much worried about those. Second, they have been quite constructive about the very fact of entering into an agreement and about negotiations as such. But I think, I will quote Mikhailo Podolyak now, I think what they told Financial Times as what they want does not represent the real situation and real position, real standing of Ukraine. That's just their wishes. And they say that these are real things. Also, there is that International Vienna Convention, diplomatic convention, and they say that during the negotiations, any contents of those negotiations cannot be mentioned in public other than upon mutual consent of the party. We don't have that mutual consent, so Russia violates that rule every time. I will not comment on that. But I'd like to remind what the President of Ukraine said. First, we are not accepted to NATO. I'd like to remind you that on the 5th or 6th day of Ukraine, the President would insist that we should be accepted to NATO. And then there was a response from NATO that we don't accept you. And then there was another option mentioned by the President, that there would be a coalition of various nations, including NATO allies, who have to provide help to victims of aggression within 24 hours in a military and humanitarian and political way. And of course, now the focus of this possible arrangement is precisely Ukraine. And third, the President has said, that when Russians have said that based on the results of those negotiations, that the Russian troops will move to where they were on the 23rd of February, that is to say, before the beginning of this invasion. The President said that there are some additional preconditions, and we will not be limited with those. I can tell you that I know for sure what is our delegation standing, and I think that we will not surrender. We will not surrender our territory, nor our national interests, nor the numbers of our armed forces, nor, say, other interests. More to it, I think that there will be many nice surprises for our people after those negotiations. At least that's how our team runs those negotiations, and I can tell you that what is acceptable for Russia here is that NATO is not going to accept us. Russians on the bilateral level have made a lot of efforts so that NATO would take this standing, because, you know, NATO is about consensus-made decisions, and even if one country does not agree, then NATO would not agree, and Russians have done a lot to achieve it. On the one hand, it's a pity. On the other hand, that's something that Russians can use. That's something that they wanted to have. That's some common point for negotiations. But these are just theoretical considerations on my part. Oleksiy, if I may, I'd like to ask about comments on commons. NATO's standing. Previously, Sergei Lavrov, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, said that neutral status of Ukraine has been discussed during negotiations. Could you please tell us, if possible, what is the model of that status at the moment? What is discussed at the moment? Well, I will not even comment on that comment. As I said, I commented on what I was able to comment. There is the NATO standing, and we should say it very clearly, Ukraine wanted to join NATO. And it's not that Ukraine dropped NATO, it's NATO that dropped Ukraine. And then our president found a way how to ensure sufficient guarantees, real guarantees, not like those which we had in the Budapest Memorandum, but real guarantees. There is a question from Republic TV from India. I would quote them in Ukrainian. Ukraine has taken a very strong standing about shaping new alliances. Do you believe that it will affect somehow negotiations with Russia? This is the first question. And the second question is this. Are there any signs that Russia has been withdrawing its troops? Can we expect any ceasefire agreement in the nearest future? Well, I'll start from the end, from the second question. First of all, based on Vienna Convention, any negotiations, or any agreements which were made, which were entered into forcefully, cannot be valid. Unless and until we have a ceasefire, we cannot discuss any agreement. That's one thing. Second, about withdrawal of Russian troops. They have not been withdrawing their troops, but they had 6 directions, 6 areas of operations, and now they have only 3 of those, which means that they have been exhausted. Out of 10 armies of operational strategic level units. We now have only 2 of them, and only 1 Russian army has not been affected. And even the second army, which remains in Russia, they have been withdrawing troops for there. On the total, they used 97 battalion tactical groups. That's more than 130,000 people, the total just battle personnel, combat personnel, direct combat personnel. On the total, it's about 200,000. 18,000, more than 90% of vehicles have been destroyed, and more than 60% of vehicles and equipment cannot be used. They have been destroyed, and 60 of those have been operating, but they're stuck in combat actions, and about 10 of them are in the reserve, and now they're moved to areas that they believe are more promising, like Mariupol. Around Kherson, the day before yesterday, you probably saw that video where the advanced command point of the army level was destroyed, with high commanders killed there, and we saw Russian troops leaving areas under Mykolaiv and near Mykolaiv and Kherson in panic. They were so fast that our troops could not even catch them. We do not shoot at people who run away, but people, just people who withdraw, we can shoot at them, and our guys could not even shoot at them. They were so fast. They stayed at the outskirts of Kherson, but then somebody would push them again, and they moved closer to the west of Kherson, but then they got stuck there. Speaking about Kyiv, Kharkiv, Chernihiv, Sumy, there is no offensive, there is no attack at all, and without significant reserves, it would be impossible. So they tried to get people from Syria, from Libya, to get more troops from Russia, and they cannot move forward with that manpower, move towards Kharkiv, Chernihiv, and Sumy. More to it, they moved most troops from there to the southern and eastern part of Ukraine. And the first question, new alliances, will it affect anyhow negotiations with Russia? You have to understand that negotiations with Russia are not just bilateral negotiations. They are within a certain framework, and they have been monitored. All these things have been very closely monitored by the top leadership of those other nations, especially of those guarantors. That's about the new security architecture. But I can tell you for sure that it's about changing the whole security architecture in Europe, in Euro-Asian area, and on the global scale, because, you know, yesterday, President spoke in front of the Congress, and it showed that the whole global architecture will change as planned by the President of Ukraine, because the existing architecture does not satisfy the needs, has not prevented Europe and the world from a large-scale war in continental Europe. So it should change. Any more questions?
From the Daily Telegraph again here, Oleksiy. You said that there were 6 areas of operation originally, but now there are only 3, I think was your comment. Could you clarify that and tell us which areas are now still being contested and which ones are not?
Look, areas or directions of operations include Kherson and Mykolaiv, say more or less, because in Mykolaiv there's nothing real at the moment. There's also a small Kryvyi Rih direction, but there our troops managed to stop the enemy and to defeat them and to counterattack. They try to surround our troops from Izum to the south, to Volnovakha, Mariupol, and to the north. And near Volnovakha, our troops, not near Volnovakha, but near Izum, our guys counterattacked And that's Mariupol, which is actually part of the joint forces operation. So these are 2.5 directions out of 6. In Kyiv direction, in Kyiv area, there is they do not move forward, and they just cannot. The same around Sumy, the same around Kharkiv. Part of those troops has been moved to the south and to the east, where they believe they have more promising areas. And here, without significant increase of manpower, they cannot do anything. More to it, they started defending. They dig the